Hi, I'm Randy Wood with TenPoint Crossbows. Today I want to talk to you about maximizing your accuracy on your crossbow and going through some tips and tricks to make sure that you're dialed in as well as you can be when you get ready to hit the woods. First thing we want to look at is the top of the bow. Look at the scope. We want to make sure that the scope is tight in the rings are tight on the rail as well. And then also, if you have a bow that has a separate scope rail, you want to make sure that the rail is tight on the trigger box as well. If you have a forward draw bow, like the Wicked Ridge Commander here, you also want to make sure that the front end is tight on the barrel. And to do that, you can just grab right up by the pockets and twist side to side and make sure that you don't have any issue, doesn't feel loose with that front end on the barrel. You'll see that gap wiggle and that joint move if you do. Don't grab out here by the limbs because there is some flex and you will have movement down here, but again, you're really not moving anything up at that joint. So you want to be watching this joint and grab right up by the pockets to check and make sure that that front end is tight on the bow. The next piece of the puzzle in accuracy is arrows. And you want to make sure that you have the same weight field tips or broadheads, that your arrows are the same, that everything matches up there, and then you also want to number your arrows. So I'll number this arrow 1, this one 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. Then when you're shooting, and again, start with field tips when you're getting everything dialed in and you're wanting to get your maximum accuracy, is now take arrow 1 and shoot it at dot 1 on the target. Arrow 2 goes to dot 2, 3 at 3, so on and so forth. Then after you shoot that round of 3 or 6 arrows 3 or 4 times, you'll see some differences in the arrow and their point of impact. You'll want to then go through and kind of cull your arrows. That will let you see arrow 1, arrow 3, and arrow 4 may be hitting exactly the same, but arrow 2 may be a little bit off. So, go through and pick the arrows that are hitting the most accurate and closest to the same point of impact every time. One other thing we like to check, or we call, is a kind of a spin test. And you can spin it in your hand and just kind of feel, but it's way better to lay it on a flat surface, and then you can take that arrow and roll it. When you're rolling it across a flat surface, you want to watch the end, especially again with your broadheads, to make sure that the end of that broadhead is running true with the arrow and that it doesn't have a wobble with it. While you've got the spin tester out or while you're testing your arrows, it's also not a bad idea to just do the same thing and look at your nocks. Make sure they appear to be very round and true. And then also, while you've got them out, just glance and make sure your odd color fletch is lined up with the notches on the nock. And that's going to make the nock perpendicular to the odd fletch. It's going to grab the string cleanly and give you the most accuracy and consistency. So a couple tips if you're sighting in off of a tripod. First and foremost, when you set the tripod up, if it has a bubble level, make sure that your tripod is sitting level. Use that tool that's at your disposal. Make sure that tripod is straight up and down. Then also, if your bow has, or your scope has, a bubble level with it, take advantage of that. You can also just purchase the bubble level separately. But if you cant your crossbow and get a little bit side to side, then that will affect your downrange accuracy for sure. Thirdly, and especially with a reverse draw crossbow, even if you're shooting with that bow in a tripod, hold on to that tripod or hold on to that front grip. Reverse draw bows, because they don't have a lot of weight up front, tend to want to jump or bounce, and that will decrease your accuracy, especially at distance. So again, with a reverse draw, you want to hold firm on that front grip, even if that bow is in a tripod, because that tripod on the shot will move a little bit and jump a little bit, and you holding it firm will again just get rid of one more variable and it'll tighten your groups down. With any AccuSlide or AccuSlide Max bows, remember, once you cock the bow, you want to do your backwind process. So in this one, we're just going to back it off, hit the gear stop and open that up. But again, what those backwind steps do is they get that trigger box in the same spot every time, and accuracy is all about consistency and repeatability. Another thing with the AccuSlide Max bows is that you want to make sure when you load the arrow into the bow, that you don't get a vein below the string. So again, it's both veins up here. The red vein will be up front and over the string here. Also, you want to make sure, and this is on the TX or the TRX, you want to make sure that that arrow is sitting on these rollers up front. Because if you get that arrow out of that slot and off of those rollers, you're not going to have good accuracy. That arrow is going to fly off because it's not driving down the middle of the track because you don't have it on the rollers. So if your accuracy isn't where you think it should be, and we've talked about making sure the scope is tight, we've talked about numbering your arrows, shooting arrow 1 at dot 1, so on and so forth. Really the next thing that you're going to want to look at is, what are the options? What are some other possible variables out there? You can look at your bow assembly and look at the timing to make sure that your cams are in time. And you don't have to be a bow expert to kind of diagnose this. The cams should be mirror images of each other. So if one is rotated more than another, then that's probably going to cause a problem. So that's certainly something that you want to look at. If you feel like you need to take it into a shop and talk to the shop, when you go in, make sure that you take your arrows. Make sure that you've paid attention to how big your group sizes are. Don't just go in and say, the bow doesn't shoot well. Have some tangible, measurable things. So what size is your group at 20 yards? How many arrows were you shooting? Those sorts of things. But those are things that you can look at and then go in when you talk to a local dealer, go in informed so that they're not grasping at straws and you've talked about what you've done so far to maximize your accuracy. One thing that either you can try or a shop can try if you still can't get the bow dialed in the way you want is if you have a different scope, could be that you have a bad scope. So if you can take the existing scope off, throw another scope on, you don't have to sight in with that scope, but you'll be able to tell right away if you shoot 3 or 4 or 5 arrows with that new scope and everything seems grouped together well and it's consistent, then maybe the situation is a bad scope and that scope would need to be replaced. So again, when you're looking for accuracy and consistency, start close. So do your first round of shooting at 20 yards. Don't be changing your range. Don't shoot 20, 30, 40. Get exactly dialed in at 20. Find where your arrows are hitting at 20. Then, once everything's lined up at 20, then you can stretch your distances out to 30 and 40 and make the needed adjustments at those distances. Now that we've gone through these lists of tips, techniques, hopefully you've learned something, you've got a little bit better consistency, a little more accuracy. If you still feel like you need help, go ahead again and go to the TenPoint Crossbow website to find your local TenPoint authorized service center. They'll get you dialed in.